And joining us today in our Book Talk segment, great to welcome a man who's written a really interesting book. It's called Victura, The Kennedys, Sailboat, and the Sea, chronicling some of the Kennedy history, but along with their love of sailing, and that's the name of the boat that they had. We're joined today by the author of the book, James W. Grant, from out in Illinois today. And James, good to talk to you. How are you today?
I'm great. Good to talk to you too, Doug.
Yeah, I had a chance to read through the book, and I don't know a lot about sailing, but I kind of like how you weave the history of the Kennedys with their love of sailing. I think a lot of people might think the Kennedys, when it came to family activities, touch football was kind of the thing that we all saw on the films and all that. But sailing, of course, living up there near the Cape and all that was a huge part of their life, right?
Yeah, they certainly were known for the touch football, and I always had a feeling that it was more because it's easier to photograph people on the lawn than it is out on a sailboat. I think it's more a function of that. But the Kennedy image certainly is tied to sailing when you consider some of those images, like the cover of Life magazine with Jack and Jackie Kennedy on the bow of the Victura.
Yeah, very famous picture of that. Of course, the PT-109, the whole thing with Kennedy during the war years. A lot of people associate him with being on the sea at that time. But I didn't realize that they had this particular boat going back to his JFK's, I'm talking his childhood, back in the 30s, right? Early 30s when they bought this.
Right. The family acquired the Victura in 1932 when Jack was 15 years old, and all the brothers and sisters sailed that boat and a couple of other smaller sailboats that they had and raced against one another. I really think those family bonds were secured and tightened through the experience of sailing together, so that Joe Jr. and Jack and Bobby and Ted and Eunice, and then later when Ethel joined the family by marrying Bobby, she certainly began to use sailing as a way to bond with her children. They used to go out every single day, so it was really crucial to the relationships within the family, and that's what I thought I could accomplish with this book, was to really tell that story, not only about a sailboat, but also about a very strong family, one of the great American families.
Yeah, when you decide to write a book about the Kennedys, I guess you could say to yourself, well, there's been hundreds, maybe thousands of books written on the family, but this is a different take on it in a sense. I know you do give a lot of the history of the Kennedys in the book, but to kind of tie it together with this particular aspect of their lives, kind of a different take on it.
Yes, I really thought it was, and you're right, there have been a lot of books about the Kennedys, but nothing that really ties together the lives of the brothers and the sisters and the children over a period of 80 years or 4 generations. And one of the things I found fascinating about the story of the Kennedys is, they had such an epic family story over all those generations, and went through, as everyone knows, so many turbulent times and tragic times, starting with the death of Joe Jr. in World War II and continuing on with the assassinations in the 60s. But through all those turbulent times, they always returned to the sailing and the sea and to the Victura until they ended up giving that boat to the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. And even after that, they continued sailing other boats identical to the Victura, including a new one that they named Victura, and also other boats of the same class, which was Weano Senior. They just loved that experience, and it's been something that they've handed down generation to generation ever since.
Yeah, the sea became, in a sense, kind of a refuge for, like you said, the entire family. Obviously, they went through some terrible tragedies, and each time that happened, I think you talk about in the book, particularly when Ted Kennedy, I think he kind of went to that boat to kind of get away, or at least get it with his own thoughts after not only his brother John, but Robert got shot, right?
Yeah, that really made a strong impression on me. I really think that sailing was a means of putting life in perspective. Even when they learned that Joe Jr. had died in World War II, many of the family members, including Jack, were gathered together at the home in Hyannis, and after many tears were shed, that afternoon they said to one another, Joe would want us to go sail, so that's what they did. And there are other times when they reunited at the compound there and for a funeral, and then they go out and sail afterwards. President Kennedy, when he was in the Oval Office, had a little plaque on his desk that said, "Oh God, I see is so great and my boat is so small." And I think that really says a lot about what it meant to him.
Well, when you decide to do this book? How do you go about it? Obviously, there's a lot of history of the Kennedys. You can, if you don't know them personally, you can find out. But how do you kind of get this angle with the sailing perspective? How did you go about the research on that?
Well, there's certainly a lot of library research, as you might expect, and I did travel out to Boston to visit the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum and go through the family papers there with a lot of help from the library staff there. But what really made the book unique was that I had the opportunity to interview individual members of the family, starting with Chris Kennedy, the son of Robert and Ethel, and on to others, including Ted Kennedy Jr. and Mark Shriver and Carrie Kennedy, another daughter of Robert and Ethel, and had an opportunity to actually go for a sail with them, including a sail on a Wiano Senior, just like Victura.
A picture of you in the book on the cover there.
Yeah, that's a bigger
in the boat.
The Victura was 25-foot Wiano Seniors, they said, but they also took me out along with Ethel Kennedy, which was a wonderful thing to experience, to get to meet her and talk to her. But that was on a larger boat called Glide, just a beautiful boat of about 40 feet in length, I think, wooden boat, and just a beauty.
Most of the family then willing to talk about this? This is in a sense, I guess, a happier part of their life.
Yeah, it was funny. They asked me about one of the wife of Chris Kennedy, Sheila Kennedy, introduced me to the family and said, Jim's writing a book. Why don't you tell everybody about the book, Jim? And all those Kennedy eyes turned and looked at me, and I thought, I'm thinking, these poor people have had how many books written about them? And here's another guy just writing one more, and I explained that it was a book about their little sailboat and other aspects of their lives on the sea, and they patiently listened to me, and then Ted Jr. said, who's going to buy this book? And despite that initial skepticism, they went on and just regaled me with story after story, that many of which made their way into the book.
Well, it is amazing when you think of it, that there is such an interest still with the family. I mean, I think most people probably know the story, but I guess new generations don't. So this will fill some of that void, right, telling these stories.
Yeah, I really thought so. I really thought it was it's really a story that never has been told in quite this way because of the perspective of the sailing in the sea. But it's also just an epic, timeless story in a lot of ways. I mean, it's almost Shakespearean when you look at the ups and the downs that they've experienced. Yeah. And I thought, for example, that it was a wonderful thing to retell the story of the sinking of PT-109 in World War II, which is one that many younger generations don't really remember or haven't been told.
It's amazing when you I think we all kind of knew later on, you read the history of Kennedy's health issues, but how bad his health really was back then. I mean, with the bad back and the Addison's disease, even in his younger days. I mean, it's amazing he was able to survive that back in PT-109.
Yeah, it is amazing that he was able to, he was in and out of hospitals and sick throughout most of his childhood, and it is still somewhat amazing to me that he was able to serve in World War II as successfully as he did, and he eventually did become ill, and that was a reason for sending him home, but before he went home, he had not only the incident of the PT-109 that he led and helped his crew survive. There were other adventures on PT boats that he was involved in, and really had quite a successful military career despite that ill health.
Talk in the book as well, I enjoyed the stories about Eunice Kennedy, which you wouldn't really expect her maybe to be into the sailing as much, but she really got into it, wasn't she? Or didn't she?
She was. She really loved to sail. In fact, if you were to ask Eunice, if she were still alive, if you were to ask her, or were you the best of the female sailors in the family, she would immediately say, no, I was the best sailor, period. There's one moment where, and this is not an example of good seamanship necessarily, but she was on a racing on the Victura, and in an actual race, and she somehow leaned back too far and fell out of the boat. And she came up out of the water, treading it, and waved the crew on and said, keep going, around the mark, and pick me up on the way back, just so that they wouldn't lose the race. She was as competitive as any of them.
Well, that's the one thing about the Kennedys, the competitive nature, but I think you even talk about in the book how close they still were despite that. Sometimes you have competitive families and they don't really get along well, but it seemed like all the Kennedys got along well with each other, and still do.
Yeah, I think it was within the family. It was certainly friendly competition, and then of course they were fierce competitors and the supporters of one another when some members of the family were competing against another group of sailors on their sailboats. So they really they were incredible cheerleaders, and of course later in life they carried that over into politics and became very active in one another's campaigns, actively supportive. It's funny. I was just looking at Twitter just moments ago before we called, and there were members of the Kennedy family urging everybody they knew to get out and vote for one of the Shrivers who's running for an office out in California. And so to this day, they're just actively competing on behalf of one another. And it's a wonderful thing to see, just that continuation of that heritage.
Oh, yeah.
Likewise, it was so wonderful to visit Hyannisport and see a little 10-year-old girl, daughter of the Kennedy, a young grandchild of the Kennedys, out there learning how to fold sails, which is something that a heritage that lives on.
Great stories. The name of the book is Victura, The Kennedys, A Sailboat and the Sea, filled with not only the great history of the Kennedy family, but some wonderful pictures as well, and kind of their love of the sea and how sailing kind of really helped them through a lot of tragedies. And James Graham has been our guest. James, do you have a website? Can we get a hold of the book?
Absolutely. The website is www.thevictura.com. That's THE Victura, VICTURA.com. And there are links there to all the major booksellers where you can buy a book online or in the store.
Great. I know you race and cruise your own boat out in your area, the middle of the country, don't you? Lake Michigan, is it?
On Lake Michigan. It's on a Wilmette Harbor north of Chicago, a sailboat called Venturous. It's 24 feet in length, so it's very similar in size to the Victura. I'm not nearly as competitive a racer as the Kennedys, but I do from time to time get out there. But I'm more of a cruiser than a racer.
Well, James, congratulations again on the book, and good luck with it. And please keep in touch with us or through Steve at the Publicist, and I'd love to have you on again sometime. But thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,